and I'll give a little intro, and then we'll jump in.
Perfect. We're going to go on right now. Here we go.
And I'm going to hit record so we have this also on the cloud. And you're visible right now, Jonathan, just so you know.
Okay.
And me as well. Can you hide non-video participant?
Yes, let me figure that out.
Okay. Welcome to Essential Stories Live Roundtable. We are just beginning. If you're tuning into our live stream, sorry for the delay. Our volunteer grassroots tech team had some glitches as we learn how to live stream to YouTube as well as to Facebook. So if you have any friends or family members that wanted to join in this conversation tonight,
Perfect.
and don't use Facebook, right, you can also find us at YouTube right now, live streaming at Essential Stories Project. Welcome. I'm your host, Cara Cruickshank, and Essential Stories is a grassroots live roundtable conversation series and an international journalism and documentary film collaborative of volunteers that give voice to people on the front lines of our world's most pressing social issues. To find out more about us or to see more of our live roundtable conversations, subscribe to our YouTube channel at Essential Stories Project or visit our website at essential-stories.com. Tonight's topic is, so we voted, now what?
Bobby, when you close the door, can you close it so?
Oops. Remember to mute when you're not speaking so that doesn't happen. Thanks. So again, tonight's topic is, so we voted, now what? To begin, I'd like to introduce two soulful and wickedly talented spoken word artists to help set the space for tonight's conversation. First to the mic is 𝗨𝗪𝗏. Great to see you back, Fanta. I was so excited that you were available to join us again. We had Fanta on our panel in August, which was the last roundtable that we've hosted. And it was delightful to hear her words then, and incredibly deep, and excited for the piece that she'll be sharing tonight. Fanta is a spoken word artist coming from Harlem. She uses her poetry and platform to advocate for marginalized groups every day. Fanta moves as a mentor and leader for younger kids in her neighborhood, inspiring them that one day they'll be able to move past the hood. So please take the mic, Fanta, and share your poem.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for that gracious introduction. And the title of this poem is just titled My Black Is. I wrote it during when it was a very political climate, when everything was happening with George Floyd and Breonna Taylor. So I'm just gonna go into it. My black is not a political stance. You don't get to choose if you want to be red or blue. You don't get to skip out on voting day just because you want to. My black is not up for a debate. But being black shouldn't determine my fate. I shouldn't be scared to die at the hands of the police. I shouldn't be squirming every time I hear the chant, I can't breathe. Because all I ever wanted was y'all to see underneath. For police to see more than a target, to see me. Someday my black just sit and wait for better days to come, not truly knowing if it ever will. My black is tired of seeing another person die before she has time to heal. My black has a void that I have been trying to fill for the longest. Because black women always have to be the strongest, but even the best therapists have therapists. My black is CEO for taking it on the chin, because no matter how low they go, I always have to be the bigger person. My black was told that her public school education didn't belong in the mix with the private school guys. Now that same black will be graduating with her bachelor's in economics in record time. My black been defying odds. My black been breaking records. My black steps up and steps out. But who cares how respectable my black is when it'll only be used to demean my black friends? No matter if you're a thug, dropout, doctor, or baller, your black matters. For our black is immortal because our martyrs will never die because their name will ricochet through every Twitter chain while their whole life give a deuce to a hashtag. And I've become accustomed to this story. It feels more like a flashback. And I'm tired of carrying the burden of being the only black woman because it's one hell of a black fact. My black takes up space. My black is not controversial. My black should not be tiptoed around. Talk about me. Talk about how you love my culture but don't love my pain. How you only care when we die but don't do anything to change. How you run for my black but know every song to our blues. How when we plead Black Lives Matter, you try to drown us out and say all lives matter too. My black can't be silent. My black is mad, so that's why we riot. And my black has been chained up under the table for so long, which is why my black is inciting an uprising in as much as my black is disrespected. My black don't discriminate. My black is open to allies who are down for our fight. My black knows that all skin folk ain't kinfolk. My black knows that nothing's gonna change until these institutions do. We need to abolish racism and his cousin colorism too. My black is a sacrificial lamb for the black kin that'll come next. I'll take all the bullets if that means that my brother will be able to be black, a boy, and alive. I'll lay my head at the throne of racism if that means that my brother will survive the youth. They're black. They're melanin that pops just a little more than ours ever could. Those young black and brown kids who deserve to live in a better world, for them, my black has to be enough. That's why I can't let up. I won't let up. So share your mic today and continue to do so tomorrow. Let this be bigger than the moment. Let this be a norm. It's time to break out of the system that you just blindly conform to. Use your platform to inform those who will only listen if the words are reiterated by a white woman. Let them know that it's time to wake up. For my black will never be silenced. My black won't be overpowered, but my black is humble enough to know that alone we'll go fast, but together we'll go farther. So we'll be on the forefront. For this is our movement. But ride for us just as hard as you ride for our music, and for the love of God, stop talking about the steps you'll take and just step out and do it. The world is watching. And you tell me, what side of history do you want to be on? Thank you.
Amazing. Thank you for sharing that. Thank you for being here. Thank you for kicking off this conversation, which I think is a very timely and important one. And thank you for speaking the truth. Next, I would like to invite 𝗨𝗪𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀. I hope I'm pronouncing your name right. We text all the time, but I've never said your name out loud. That's funny. So I know 𝗨𝗪𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀 from a group of artists that we belong to that's national now, but normally based in LA, and is all about conscious rap and spoken word, and it's an incredible community. So I'm really excited to introduce 𝗨𝗪𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀 and have him here. 𝗨𝗪𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀 is an artist and overthinker based in 𝗨𝗪𝗪𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀, Illinois. In his own words, I quote him, "I am the definition of anxiety and inconsistency, but I'll be figuring it all out about how I am going to overcome all of that madness and whatnot pretty soon, LOL. Check me out now, though. I promise you won't want to miss any of the rather uncanny and uncommon things I have planned for this world. I am in the business of being vulnerable and desiring to reach out to those that need a mirror to show the reflection of someone who gets it and understands them no matter what." So that's a little glimpse of who 𝗨𝗪𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀 is. And please take the mic and share your piece.
Hello, thank you for having me. As Marisol usually says, from my community to your screen, all the love, all the love. This doesn't really have a title, so I guess it's just like an untitled stream of consciousness. I hope you enjoy. I'm done. Civil War. Confederate versus Union. Democrat versus Republican. Crip versus the Bloods. Liberal or conservative. I'm done with it. I'm done with this, oh, this is how you think, so we can't speak, but then claiming how this is a land where we can be free. I'm not living in a land where I can't portray me, because no matter what I think, someone's going to think you're crazy. I don't give a fuck if you voted for Trump. I could care less if you're riding with Biden. Just don't be careless when one's opinion is provided. And judge. And haze because you can't see eye to eye, Liz. I don't care if you agree with Black Lives Matter. Do you really believe Black Lives Matter? You think that sticker on your back windshield grants you my respect or proof that that's just a label, you fucking goof? If you care, you wouldn't be... If you care, you would treat me according to Black privilege, but treat me with the truth. Like treating me different because I'm Black and you feel guilty won't make you still guilty. Treat me like a human being and base it on the contents of my character and pretend my skin doesn't exist on my views. Make me any less than you. I got a feeling I want to profess to you. I only want the best for you. So let's stop all the your views aren't mine, so I'm condemning. It's so damning. I feel like America is ending. Rome was a perfect home, but was so greedy and separated. And we forgot they fell apart, and we resemble that same nation. Corrupt politics, rappers killing rappers. How about we stop separating and focus on loving each other before we reach the life after? Oh, Trump perpetuates what makes us separate. Yeah, whatever. No one man can cause this much chaos, never. What role do you play in keeping people on two sides? Like the truth ain't always have three sides. And being right is never where we reside. We all wrong, but everybody want to be right. So next time you see a Trump sign at the street light, don't flip a middle finger so you can feel right. Because what if you're surrounded by a tribe and they saw your thoughts unfit and you belittled for your beliefs day in and day night? Let that sink in. Now that we done voted, we need to think in large groups full of people we don't understand. Because at the end of the day, we'll never make it without our fellow human. We need to put down the signs and stop putting down each other over politics and pick up some loves because we're running off of hate and I'm not fine with it. I love you all. Racist, queer, homophobic, white, Black, half white and Black, Asian, Confederate, a bench warmer or a letterman, blood or Democrat, Roddy Ricch or your bro call me Quan. Let's keep our eyes on the future and make love the norm. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Yes. All right. So please stick around, Fanta and Ray, to join us for the conversational segment after the panelists each give their intro. So now I would like to introduce our panelists. Each of our panelists will give a 2-minute intro on their angle for tonight's topic. And I will set a timer so that if you go over your time, I will give you a signal with this obnoxious bell, and that'll let you know that it's time to wrap it up. Let's see here. We're going to start with Mark Haim. So Mark is the director of Mid-Missouri Peaceworks, an egalitarian nonprofit grassroots membership organization. Peaceworks holds a vision of an ecologically sound, sustainable world and a violence-free community in which human equality and justice flourish. His activism has spanned a broad range of progressive concerns with emphasis on energy, climate, environmental peace, and nuclear concerns. He has co-coordinated several statewide ballot issue campaigns, worked on many candidate campaigns, and Mark was co-founder of the Columbia Community Grocery Food Co-op, Missourians for Safe Energy, Missouri Energy Action, the Columbia Earth Day Coalition, the Peace Nook, the Columbia Peace Coalition, and Peaceworks Center for Sustainable Living. So welcome, Mark. And great to have you here, great to meet you, and please give your 2-minute intro.
Thank you, Cara, and thank you for inviting me. I appreciate that. You know, I'm one of the older people on this panel, maybe the oldest, I'm not sure. And that means this is the 4th time I've lived through a transition from an abysmally awful Republican administration to a centrist Democratic administration. It was the transition from Nixon Ford to Carter, the transition from Reagan Bush to Clinton, and the transition from Bush Jr. to Obama. And in all 3 of those cases, and now with the transition from Trump to Biden, we have a candidate who's won election who doesn't necessarily represent progressives. In fact, often is not very progressive, but is a relief compared to what we've been dealing with. Now, I would love to have a much more democratic electoral system, small d democratic. I'd love to see proportional representation or some form of ranked choice voting so that we actually can elect and be represented by people who represent progressive ideas and values. We don't have that, though. And the key thing that we need to do at this point, in my opinion, is to avoid the trap we've fallen into over and over again of breathing a huge sigh of relief because a Democrat was elected and thinking they're going to take care of things, because they're not going to take care of things. They're not going to do what we need and want. And we're going to have to push them to do at least some of what we hope to do, and some of what would really actually serve their interest politically in the long run, because they would be more successful and the country would embrace it. But of course, they're funded by corporate and establishment funders who want to see the status quo perpetuated. It's a neoliberalism agenda. And we really need to be intersectional at this point. I focus largely on war and peace concerns and on climate concerns, but climate concerns are climate justice concerns. And war and peace concerns are concerns about creating a peace economy that employs and serves. Okay, we'll talk more. Thank you.
So that's, the bell doesn't signify that you have to stop that second, but just to conclude your thoughts.
Well,
so if you want to add anything, go ahead.
I will simply say, Cara, that we need to do a lot of work and we need to bring our people along, the people who've worked to see change, particularly at this point, the people who worked on some of the key issues that have been going down, including Black Lives Matter and some of the important campaigns like the Bernie Sanders campaign this past year and in 2016. We need to bring those people forward and work together intersectionally to create the pressure to make the real changes, to go for a Green New Deal, to go for Medicare for all. We're not going to get those in the short run, but we need to be pushing for those ideas.
Thank you, Mark. So next, I'd like to introduce Amiry Stout, founder of Black Lives Matter Southwest Missouri. Amiry is native to the Southwest Missouri area and recently returned after a 7-year stint in Los Angeles. With a rise in America's health and racial pandemic, Amiry extended her hometown stay and became locally invested in social justice, civil rights, equality, and human rights issues. After the death of her brother, Kendra, the murder of George Floyd, and the countless Black lives lost to systemic racism, Amiry founded Black Lives Matter Southwest Missouri. In June, BLM Southwest Missouri hosted a 3,000-strong march, making local history as the largest peaceful march to take place in the Southwest region of the historically red state. Since then, BLM at SWMO has fought to make local and internal change, starting with SPD, Greene County, and the city of Springfield and its surrounding areas. Missouri has the 2nd highest number of lynchings outside the Deep South. Black Lives Matter Southwest Missouri is trying to address that as well. So thank you so much for joining us tonight, Amiry, and please give your intro.
Hi, yeah, thank you for having me. when I found out about Essential Stories, I was really excited because, part of my journey in organizing since Black Lives Matter Southwest Mo has been a thing, has been rallying for leaders of different other progressive organizations dealing with other issues, getting us all in one spot. And not to totally piggyback off of Mark, but I also, it resonates with me that part of our, mission and moving forward is drawing awareness to how all of these progressive issues are intersectional, and how Black Lives Matter kind of serves as the umbrella, if you will, that all of these issues kind of sit under. So we just had an election celebration event, and I called it a celebration because there is this collective sigh that I think we all experienced after, our president-elect Joe Biden and Kamala kind of officially took their seat as the declared winner of the 2020 election. And for our area, for Missouri, where we voted red across the ballot. So I wanted to give this area an opportunity to, celebrate the small win, but also bring awareness to what our next steps are and how we can work locally to flip the ballot to a blue turnout, or really, I don't even like using the word blue, but a more progressive turnout. We saw that happen in other states in this election, and I think if we can follow those Black leaders that were able to make that happen, we can, manifest that same thing here. So that's our goal, and I'm really excited to be here. I think it's in these conversations where we lay a lot of that groundwork. So thank you for having me.
Yes, agreed, and a pleasure. Thanks for being here again. All right, so next I want to introduce Sparrow X. Carter, poet, activist, and musician. Sparrow has been published in The New Yorker, The New York Times, the American Poetry Review, The Sun, and quoted in Vogue. In 1 month, he recently published 3 books, Small Happiness and Other Epiphanies, The Princeton Diary, Trump Verse. Sparrow improvises daily on an out-of-tune 7-string Russian guitar while chanting in Sanskrit. He lives in a double-wide trailer in 𝗣𝗍𝗶𝗴, New York. Sparrow has run for president of the United States 8 times. He always asks his followers not to vote for him, but to vote for the Democrat. So, hello, Sparrow. Great to have you here at one of our roundtables. Sparrow is a longtime friend and colleague of my hometown, actually. So please take the mic and give your intro to the topic.
Oh, thank you so much. You hear me? Okay. Yeah, I'm honored to be here. I think I'm going to start with this poem I wrote recently. It's called The Biden Era. The Biden Era. It's time for the resistance to become the support group. It's the whole poem. I'm not sure what I mean by that, but I think in part I mean something like we have to be for something. We know what we're against. We've been fighting against something or other for 4 years, and now we have to fight for something. So I think I'm going to read a little bit from Small Happiness because I'm a little bit inspired by 𝗨𝗪𝗧. So I'm going to read this poem called Full of Love. Because actually, I should tell you this. I was talking to my tree today. I talked to these trees behind my house. I live in the mountains in the middle of nowhere, and these trees started talking to me. And the tree said, love. And I thought, love. Maybe I'll try to, bring love into this conversation. So this is a poem called Full of Love. I'm so full of love. I even love my dentist. In fact, I love your dentist. And I'm going to read 2 more pieces from this book, Small Happiness. I once shook hands with a man who had shaken hands with W.H. Auden. Seek out people who've met your heroes. In other words, shake hands with someone who shook hands with Malcolm X, you know? That's my advice to you. And then there's another thing I wrote. If everyone laughs at you, so what? What's so bad about laughter? I'm going to stop there.
Thank you. And under 2 minutes, you had 3 seconds left. Not bad. So yeah, thanks for the opening laughter. That's helpful too. We need that in these serious conversations. So, and yes, I think love and whatever is also a good place to dwell. So now I'd like to introduce Jacqueline Wales, author of 3 books. When the Crow Sings, The Fearless Factor, and most recently, The Fearless Factor at Work. Jacqueline is an astute observer of behavior and is endlessly fascinated by the messiness of being human and finds people who are vulnerable and honest about their struggles incredibly interesting and courageous. As an author of 3 books, she has explored human behavior and asked tough questions to discover hard truths for more than 35 years. Jacqueline believes in the power of being fearless to create the career and life you want. So please take the mic and give your intro. Great to have you.
Thank you, Karen. Nice to be here and wonderful to hear everyone. And Sparrow, you definitely inspired me. You made me laugh tonight. This was beautiful. Loved it. My work for the last 35 years or more has really been about investigating human behavior, looking at how people think, what their actions are, what their mindsets are. And we've been going through some really hard years for quite a while. You know, Trump clearly is the focus of the attention. And now that you know, his days are numbered, reluctantly for him, but his days are numbered. I'm interested in the conversation that will take place that brings people together. Because I think, you know, one of the things that we're really, really clear about right now is that divisions in this country are extreme. Now, I would say, Mark, you probably have seen a lot more of the extremism and the different, you know, governments that have taken place here in this country. And as you can tell from my accent, I'm not born here. I came to this country in 1979, and I came from the English parliamentary system, which again has its problems. In fact, there's very little in the way of governments around the world right now that are functioning healthily. Maybe New Zealand, but that's about it. So, you know, what I'm interested in is how do we get the conversations going? How do I get to understand what's the thinking? I think it was very clear from this election that people wanted Trump out because the Republicans, in terms of the Senate, they got what they wanted pretty much. So it wasn't voting against Republicanism particularly, it was voting against Trump. I could see that very clearly. But now how do we have the conversation that stops the separation? There's been a lot of calls for civil war, and Corey, you mentioned that in your piece. And I think that's maybe the extreme, but we're certainly there with a lot of the conflicts that are occurring around this country. And so the dialogue for me is what I'm really interested in. How can we open up channels of communication? How can we help to understand what the other one or the other side really wants and needs? Because I think there's been a great swathe of this country that has been overlooked for a very, very long time, including with Black Lives Matters. I mean, this is so systemic in this country that it's going to be really tough to unearth it and really bring some light into this darkness that is currently covering. And I'm not just talking about COVID, because that's another element of this that makes it very hard to have this conversation. But I live my life with a great deal of optimism. I live my life with a great deal of hope. And my hope is that forums like this can take place more often and bring in people who you don't agree with and figure out how can we find that common core? How can we find that place? Because all of us, I do behavioral stuff, and frankly, it's all driven by our thinking and our circumstances. And at core, we're humans and we have strong emotions, and the emotions get in the way of the thinking. And that's what's been going on for the longest time. So I'm passionate about this, as you can tell. My mission in life is to change the world one person at a time. And I do that through my coaching practice. So I'm kind of like, a little bit on the outside in terms of being an activist like many of you are, because I'm not galvanizing a ton of people. But what I am passionate about and what I bring is the hope that I can have those conversations, those dialogues, and help people to open up their mind a little bit so that they can see other options. That's really what I do best of all.
Thank you, Jacqueline.
Yeah.
Great. So now we're going to move into our conversational segment. I'm going to ask 2 questions to the panel, one at a time. And this is meant to be, interactive. So you can just jump in where you feel inspired to. Fanta and Ray, you're also invited in. So jump in when you feel an impulse. And this is just for us as activists to have an exchange that other people can listen in on, but it's really for us to be exploratory and see how we can shed light for one another and ourselves in new ways. So the first question, and by the way, there are 2 other panelists who, one had an emergency and is hoping to jump on at 9 if she's able to, and the other is having tech issues and trying to get into the Zoom. So they may join us at some point. So if new people pop up, they're meant to be here. Okay. So the first question I would love to explore is, what leverage do progressives and socialists have in a Biden presidency to pursue policy goals?
I guess not hearing anyone else, I'll jump in and say that Biden would not have been elected had it not been for strong voting by progressives. And yet people he's appointing right now to key positions in his administration are very centrist and not very progressive. They're an improvement over the Trump people by a lot, sure, but they're also basically taking us back to, this is sort of third Obama term in some ways, and that's not very healthy because it was the Obama administration's lack of being able to meet the needs of the people that gave us Trump. And it wasn't just Obama, but it was 40 years of neoliberalism. So in terms of leverage, what we have is essentially the ability to communicate through organizations and individuals with our newly incoming administration. And, in response to the notion that we need to go from being resistance to being a support group, I would say we should support Biden whenever we can and oppose what he's doing whenever we must. Unfortunately, with Obama and with Clinton and with Carter, we must came up a lot. And I think it's going to come up a lot here too. I'm hopeful that we'll see him taking initiatives, but I think it's going to take pushing him. Back in the Great Depression era, when Roosevelt was in office and labor leaders came to Washington to say what they wanted, Roosevelt said to them, "You've got to make me do it," meaning they got to mobilize. So we need to have mass demonstrations. We need to have letter writing campaigns. We need to have people speaking out, writing op-eds, writing letters to the editor, getting on public media, making their voices heard, getting on alternative media and spreading alternative media. There's a ton to be done, but we need to be engaged. We can't just expect it to fall like fruit ripe from a tree. It's not going to.
Hi, Enrique. You made it. Welcome. Good
Thank
to
you.
see you.
Sorry for all the drama.
I'm glad it worked out. So we are in the conversational segment of the evening, and we're exploring the question, what leverage do progressives and socialists have in a Biden presidency to pursue policy goals? So unlike the first segment where each of you had 2 minutes to speak, this is an exchange. So talk if you want to, interrupt if you want to. It's a free-for-all.
Sure. Well, I think we all have a lot of leverage if we take action and not just expect things to happen, because we have done that in the past where we get the person in office that maybe somebody favored, think they're going to keep their promises. And as we all know, they don't in many cases. But we have a tremendous amount of power, as the previous person was mentioning it, by taking it to the streets. You know, whose streets? There are streets. We have seen what our brothers and sisters have done with Black Lives Matter. We need to keep that momentum alive, and we need to keep it alive so that Biden and Harris live up to the promises that they've made, and other promises that have been made by people that we've elected, because we have seen pure evil the last 4 years, and it's time for a change. And we are that change. We are that change if we take it to the streets and hold these persons responsible, hold their feet to the fire.
I agree. And let me just give you a clue of who Enrique is, in case you're wondering who this new person who popped up is. Enrique Morales is an executive director and founder of Gente Unida, founder of Border Angels, and a host of the podcast Buen Hombre. He is a lifetime human rights activist in the San Diego-Tijuana border region who has dedicated his life to saving migrant lives. Enrique has shut down anti-immigrant vigilantes and can be seen on public television debating Tucker Carlson, Bill O'Reilly, Sean Hannity, Lou Dobbs, Laura Ingraham, and Joe Arpaio. This past year, Enrique has focused on voter engagement and mobilization in efforts to remove the Trump administration. And Enrique is also very active within the Black Lives Matter movement. So good to have you here, and glad you can join in to this conversation.
Happy to be here.
Anybody else want to add to what Mark and Enrique said, or give another angle to in response to the question? Ray, what are your thoughts?
If I was to respond to Mark, I would just say important being careful of who gets a platform. Because I feel like something that's really prominent in today, which is, I swear, this is the craziest thing ever. This new Clubhouse app, I don't know, whoever thought of this shit is a fucking genius. Like, whoever thought of this shit. I'm watching it, and you're basically seeing these people, and you think, okay, like someone like Joe Budden has a room or whatever, and they get to moderate and they got control. Then you get into these other rooms, and it's like, okay, they have like 100-something people, but it's fairly new app. So 100 people is like a lot of things to generate from this kind of startup app. And it's like these no-name nobodies who's just getting to talk whatever shit they want to talk. Like, it's crazy. So this morning, I don't know if like this is going to be a big thing or not. Some dude made this room about Jack Harlow's album cover because it had like the black lady's leg in it. And he was upset. And he was like, that's the problem with hip hop or whatever. And that ends up being like the biggest room on Clubhouse. It gets like 1,200 people on there. And they're all just talking. And it's all drum up off of this shock value and this just talk. So if you just get someone who's just going to go up there and say shock value shit, it's not going to be beneficial for either side. If you're just going up there just to say some shit, just to get some clout, just to get what you say, I feel like there needs to be like some form of filtering process to find out who's going to be the leaders for these platforms. So when Biden's fucking up, hey, check your man, check Biden, or someone that we can check to make sure that we're checking Biden. And it's not just we're leaving it up to the hands of a whole bunch of individuals who really don't know what the fuck they're talking about.
I haven't heard of Clubhouse. What is it exactly?
Oh my, I can't even explain it. It's like this app to where they're essentially holding, I would call it like a democratic seminar. and there's these people who are basically prominent people. They invite people into the rooms or whatever. And there's like a level. There's a moderators. There are people that the moderators follow. And there's just like the general public that just creates this audience. So if you just start a room and you're the moderator, you say something like, for instance, Jack Harlow's album cover is racist, you're going to get a whole bunch of people to come in there and go into it no matter who you are. Or you can say something productive, and who's going to listen to that shit? No one's going to automatically click on to that. So it's just this, it's like this weird social media app. It's blowing my mind. I don't understand.
Wow, it sounds kind of like the old school chat room on steroids.
It's changing the game. It's scary.
So anyone else want to add to this topic in terms of what leverage do we have to push policies in the Biden administration? Those were some interesting points made by each Mark and Enrique and Ray.
I want to say one more thing. Right now, the Democrats have a very narrow majority in the House. And at best case, if these two races in Georgia go to the Democrats, they will have a razor-thin majority with Vice President Harris being the tiebreaker. And what that means is that best case, we are very unlikely to get much legislation passed that would not be something that a very centrist Democrat would support. Because right now there are a number of people in both the House and Senate Democratic caucuses who are fairly conservative. So at best, we're not going to get much through Congress. And if the two Democrats in Georgia don't win, we're going to have McConnell running the Senate still, and we're definitely not going to get anything out of there. So what we need to be pressing Biden to be doing is executive orders, independent action, things that his administration can do outside of the realm of Congress, because we're not going to get what we need through Congress. And there is something called Climate President, if you check out that website, that's come up with 10 big things that the incoming Biden administration can do in the first 10 days without Congress on the climate issue. There's similar lists being put together for other issues. And I think American Prospect has come up with a big list of things that Biden can do independently. It's more intersectional, not just on climate, but on a variety of things. I think we need to pursue those and press him and press his incoming administration to pay attention to what he can do, and don't let him take the excuse of, I can't get this through Congress, so it's not going to happen.
Well, I'd like to jump in with that one, because I think you're absolutely right, Mark. I think the biggest challenge for going forward is going to be the Senate. And, we all hope that Georgia carries those 2 Democratic seats. Chances of that are, maybe marginal at best at this point in time. I'm not convinced that they're going to win, at least get 2 seats out of it. They might get 1 out of it. But the problem will be that even with the best intentions, I think Biden is definitely up against a big stone wall in trying to get things through. And I agree with you, executive action will be necessary in order to really move the needle on certain issues. But I do think that, we can take to the streets, we can certainly demonstrate, we can make noise about what it is that we think needs to be done, but it's still going to have to be the whole piece of getting this legislation through and making things happen. And I'm not 100% sure that it's going to be an easy ride for him. In fact, I know it's not going to be an easy ride. And so I think we're going to have to get very creative about how things get done at this stage of the game.
Yeah, I think it's Jacqueline mentioned about being very creative. It's very important. It doesn't have to be 50-50, because I think everybody's hung up on getting these 2 Georgia seats, which would be great. But let's suppose we get 1 or none. There's senators on the other side, and I'm independent. There's senators on the Republican side that sometimes vote with the Democrats. So it's not a lost cause. It doesn't have to be. It'd be great if it was 50-50 with Harris breaking the tie, but it doesn't have to be. And the executive action is, that was Mark mentioned a moment ago, that's really the way to go on a lot of these issues. That's something that was unheard of, 10 years ago. But now it's happening. Now it's happening on a more regular basis, unfortunately, by you know who. But let's get Biden to start doing that. One of the things that I don't like about Democrats is that they don't have a backbone on a lot of these issues. The Republicans could care less. They do whatever they want to do, and they don't look back. And they walk lockstep right to hell. They could care less. The Democrats are kind of ginger about those types of things. Oh, would it be the right thing to do, and so forth. I say we increase the Supreme Court judges. I say we take executive action. Let's go. Let's go. The country has spoken. And I'm sure wherever you're at, I'm in San Diego, you have these idiots out here with their Trump flags. We were attacked. 2 weeks ago. So I filed a police report, a sheriff's report, a hate crimes report. This is what's happening right here in San Diego. And I know that's happening in other places across the country. So the Democrats have got to be aggressive. They've got to, take executive action, be bold, not this gingerly walking, well, that's not the right thing to do. I say we see a new Democratic Party, very progressive, and let's go forward. That's what I would like to see.
Well, it was interesting because Obama today was interviewed and he actually said, the old guard has to go. The Nancy Pelosi's, the Chuck Schumers, the, Dianne Feinstein. It's time for a new guard and bringing in some of these young folks who've come into Congress and really want to make a difference. And of course, for many people, they're too progressive. They're too risky, if you like. But I agree with you 100%, Enrique. There has to be a certain amount of, how do we maneuver this? Executive orders are one way of doing this. And I think there are a lot of Republicans who, God willing, will, once the miasma of the Trump years has disappeared a little bit, they might actually come forward. But to your point about backbone, I agree with you. I think the Democrats on a lot of issues are wishy-washy. They don't take a very firm approach on it. It's like, well, let's wait and see. Well, wait and see, look what happened. There we had 4 years of absolute hell on wheels. So from that point of view, I'm really hoping that we see some change of approach to this stuff as we go forward into this new 4-year term. I don't expect miracles, but I do expect that there will be something that we can hopefully see an improvement on.
That's a great segue, unless anybody wants to add to that, to my next question. So I'll wait a moment in case anybody wants to chime in. Go ahead, Sarah.
Yeah, I just want to say that I think it's worth pointing out that on a lot of the progressive issues, the American people are with us. The DREAM Act, for example, some sort of climate change legislation, Obamacare particularly, some sort of relief for COVID. These are all things that are wildly popular with Americans. It's not like we progressives are a bunch of weird communists trying to overthrow the government. We're just trying to do what the majority of people want. In many cases, most of what we're for, even against racism. These are majoritarian positions. It's just a matter of this system is not so good at, representing the will of the majority. So there's a Senate. I read this in the New York Times. Why do the Republicans have the Senate? Because they have 38% of the vote. 38% of Americans control the Senate because of the way the Senate is set up. And the Senate can tell the Congress, go to hell. We're not going to pass any of your legislation. So it's a very undemocratic system, and they have found a genius way to exploit it. But nonetheless, what we want is what most people want. I think that counts for something.
Absolutely. Yeah. And the elephant in the room is big business and Wall Street and who's in the pockets of the Democratic Party, or rather vice versa, who the Democratic candidates are in the pockets of. And we know that, 80% of Americans want universal health care. And that is not something Biden has any interest in delivering or has given any reference to delivering. So that's what I'm talking about when I'm saying what leverage do we have to push policy, because as the majority, we are not being represented by, we are being ruled by both parties, essentially, if they're not willing to go with what the majority who's electing them, or even just the majority of Americans, period, want in terms of policy. So my second question to all of you is, there's a little preface here. Many working class interest groups have formed and developed during the Obama-Biden presidency and have continued to grow during the Trump-Pence presidency. Democratic Socialists of America, Justice Democrats, Working Families, which already existed but grew significantly during the Obama years, Occupy, the first BLM uprisings happened during the Obama presidency, Standing Rock, the Keystone XL protests, the Flint, Michigan fiasco, the fossil fuels divestment movement, Sunrise, movements on immigration reform. And then more recently in the Trump era, we have the Women's March, Me Too, the Squad, etc. So as Naomi Klein, the journalist, activist, and best-selling author, articulates well, our movements are numerous, but very siloed on issues as opposed to coalesced around a coherent vision. And Sparrow kind of pointed to that in his intro. My question is, what can we do specifically to help unite all of these movements together in order to summon and actualize the full power of the people?
I'll just hop in here real quick. And that's a great question. I think part of the answer to that is recognizing that Black Lives Matter encompasses all of those same issues, that those progressive organizations have intersectional issues with us, and really rallying behind Black voices and Black leadership is probably the most consistent way and thorough way that we can drive, this collective mission where we want it to go. So I think it's part of that is just getting behind the proper leadership and making sure you're supporting voices that whose mission is to, uplift the Black community and create the change that's needed in the system. We've said multiple times and made reference multiple times to how these problems are systemic. Black people are the number one people affected by that. So if you can rally behind Black leadership, then everyone else's issues that are intersectional with, the oppression of marginalized groups, they're going to get answered. So I would say, I don't think that's the full answer, but I definitely think it's a really important part that, especially for non-Black allies, garnering that support and that focus back to Black leadership is essential. Absolutely.
Yeah, my only addition to that would be specifically Black women and women of color and the LGBTQ plus community, because as we've seen with Black Lives Matter, though it was begun by women and meant to put women and LGBTQ at its core, a lot of the airtime that the movement has garnered is about Black men specifically and police brutality. And that's what the media has focused on. And that's what much of the movement has focused on. And there is much more to it, as you point out. And I think when women are at the core of our priorities in terms of policy, women of color especially, Native women, immigrant women and Black women, as well as the LGBTQ community, then we are really moving in the right direction. Thank you for that. Anybody else want to tackle that question? How do we unify and leverage the power of the people more efficiently?
Yeah, Cara, that's a really tricky issue. Back in 2005, I gathered both Gente Unida and Border Angels, which are two groups that I founded, and we went across the country in February of 2006, 111-car caravan from San Diego to Washington, D.C. and back. It took us the entire month of February. We wanted to make sure that when we spoke in the 40 cities that we visited, we focused on themes that everybody would be united on. We knew there were some issues where there would be division. And I think we're facing a situation like that right now, where we have certain issues that pretty much everybody's united on. Race issues, women's issues, environment, humane immigration policies, the healthcare issue. Most of those, the majority of the country, gay rights, most of those, the majority of the country has a strong view in one direction. And I think the direction that most of us would have. So let's focus on those issues. There's some other important issues, but they're too divisive. So when we did this caravan and went across the country to 40 different cities and 20 different states, when people would say, for example, should we vote for this candidate or that, or in various bills, I said, let's stay focused on the issue. Our caravan, which was called Marcha Migrante, focused on making sure that people went out to vote, that we want humane immigration policies, and that we don't want people to die in crossing the desert. Because as you know, we go out and put water in the desert so that people don't die. And since 1994, 11,000 human beings have died crossing in the desert. 6 children died in Border Patrol custody under this past administration. We have the tear gassing, the children in cages. People are against all of that. The separation of families, 545, people are against all of that. So let's be unified on those issues and go out there and demand that there is progress of that with executive actions. We've got to get it done. And then there's other issues that are going to be more divisive, but I think we got to go for the ones that are more universal, universally accepted, like the Republicans have done. Even though they're not universally accepted, they could care less, they just do it. Well, these are universally accepted by most people. Let's get these done. Get Biden and Harris to pass executive orders and move forward. Move forward. We've lost a lot of time these last 4 years. And we've got to regain that time and continue to move forward. And I know we can do it. I know that we can do it. We have a lot of talented people throughout elected offices and people not in elected offices. A lot of these movements that have been so successful. And I'm glad we were able to get the vote out, because I was worried about, we had all these huge marches, the Women's March and the Black Lives, and I love all of that. And I'm glad people did vote. Well, now let's make sure that that vote becomes action. And I think that by moving in that direction and with that spirit, I know we can get this done.
Yeah, thank you. Fanta, the photo you have up makes it look like you have something to say, and I keep looking at your photo thinking you want to jump in. So if you're there, we haven't heard from you. I'd love to hear your thoughts. I don't know if she's present or just keeping a placeholder there for later. All right. Anybody else want to add anything before we move to our, Fonda says her background is, she's got some background noise right now. Okay, no worries.
I'd like to jump in if I can.
Yeah, please.
I think the question you're raising is a critical one, and it's not an easy one to answer. If it was easily answered, we would have united long ago. Part of the problem we've got is that we have a duopoly based on the winner-take-all, first-past-the-post kind of electoral system, where plurality wins and third parties, which would be a natural way of building support for a broad platform of progressive concerns. But third parties are losing propositions. There's a spoiler factor, so you end up with a situation like in 2000, when Nader got significantly more votes in Florida than those that separated Bush and Gore, or like we had in 2016 when the Green Party candidate in Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania had more votes in each of those 3 states than what separated Clinton from Trump. So you end up in a situation where people don't want to vote for the Green candidate. And you really need electoral reform to get to where you can build a party. So you end up with this notion, if we're not going to have a party that contests for electoral power through elections, then what do? And a lot of people coalesce into interest groups, whether it's reproductive rights or whether it's climate action or racism. You know, you can go around the table. There are all these separate issues, but they really all fit together, and they fit together under a notion of democracy because, as several people have pointed out, the progressive positions are ones that are democratically the ones that people want. But we need to develop the vehicle to get there. And what we've done locally is try to build alliances of the various groups. We set up something called the Solidarity Network. That Solidarity Network includes peace groups. It includes groups that are working on reproductive rights, groups that are working on civil rights, civil liberties, economic justice, and a whole variety of other issues, the death penalty. And by bringing those groups together, at the time of the Women's March, we've held solidarity marches in solidarity with the Women's March in Washington, but also in solidarity of all these groups coming together and working together. It's not a perfect model. One of the things we've found is it's really hard to keep groups engaged because each group goes back to their own territory. You know, Jobs with Justice is working on organizing workers and trying to fight for their jobs. And, you know, there's a whole bunch of specific issues that people are working on, but we really do need to build those unified kinds of alliances, of unifying kinds of alliances. The other thing to do is to recruit candidates who will run in Democratic primaries and hopefully become nominees and then run for office, whether that's from the city council and local county commission level, right on up through state and federal levels. And I think a lot of that energy was shown in the Bernie Sanders campaign and the platform that he put together and what he stood for. It was a very unifying kind of a platform. We need to support things like that, in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, each speech that Biden gives is how he's going to unify America, but I haven't really heard what the plan is there with, you know, still a very large population of disgruntled Trump supporters who did not vote for him and are very, you know, very deep into seeing Trump as their leader, as well as the QAnon thing that's been so prevalent. You know, what exactly is the plan on the administration side when they say unify? What does that look like? But certainly here on the ground, for those of us that are passionate about social equity and social equality, we do need to continue, I think, to find ways to unify. And I think the example of Bernie Sanders' platform is a good one in terms of how just that, the fact there was some vision there and some sense of how every marginalized group might benefit by getting on that bandwagon was enough glue, but yet it crumbled. So, you know, now we're all sort of scrambling to reorient and reconfigure, you know, how to move forward again in a unified way. I'm interested, Amari, to hear what are kind of your top priorities right post-election for your group in Missouri?
Yeah, so I kind of touched on earlier how we hosted a election celebration. Well, during that, we had invited, I think we had 22 speakers that day. And I mean, that's about, it equaled out to a few good hours of awesome conversation. But most importantly, every one of our speakers represented a different facet of the community. So we had religious leaders standing up there right next to Planned Parenthood, standing up there right next to different Black Lives Matter groups in the area, and Missouri Jobs for Justice, and Promo Missouri, which they advocate for LGBTQ youth mostly. We also had Grupo Latino Americano and All Tribes United, which is an indigenous group. So what we kind of did there was we created a space for multiple different groups in society locally to come together and say, hey, and this was hosted by Black Lives Matter Southwest Missouri, kind of going back to how we're like this umbrella. Black Lives Matter serves as this umbrella that can hold all of those, and really there to organize that's really red. Like 60% of this state went red across the ballot completely. And some really good candidates lost their seats to people who have zero interest in passing policies that uplift and protect the marginalized. So a lot of that is lack of education. And I think really like putting your efforts into tackling, educating society and then rallying them to show up to the polls and vote for the elections that are the elections that happen in between the big ones. Because there's a lot of power in grabbing seats that aren't the president. Grabbing those local seats, working with your city council, working at a state level. And when you're in the Bible Belt, one of the biggest battles you're dealing with conservatively is the religious pool, the religious, foundation where people have set their political beliefs. For example, the Lincoln Project, they are basically like a group of straight white men who were some of the top Republican strategists and campaign leaders who have branched away from that since the Trump administration and said, hey, this isn't what being a Republican's about. So, we want to challenge that, and we want to essentially like take that vote back. So you had a bunch of Republican straight men fighting on our side. And one of the things they talked about was how they target and how they run like smear campaigns, which I thought was really interesting. They said that if they target the conservative woman, 9 times out of 10, if you can get that woman to come over to a more, progressive side, the husband will follow. And a lot of conservative women vote red solely on the issue of abortion, not understanding that abortion is something that the abortion rates are only ever affected when you invest time and money into sex education and reproductive resources. To do that, you have to support progressive leaders. You have to support progressive policies. Because of the misinformation that's out there and because of the bad propaganda that's out there, you have a lot of people voting red, and they're voting for something that they themselves are not even really for. It's never mattered that there's been a Republican in office as far as, affecting how women, go about their bodies, and it's never changed. It's never lowered the abortion rate to vote conservative. So I think a lot of it is putting, a lot of what we want to do is we want to put into light leaders that represent all of these different areas in society that everyone can relate to. So women who are against Planned Parenthood might be able to relate to some of the religious leaders that are there who are speaking to that and saying, hey, this matter is intersectional and here's why, and educating them on that, and then encouraging them on how to vote and where to vote and who to support. You know, there's a lot of new faces up and coming that I expect will continue to up and come in the next 4 years, as far as like, you know, the youth that are coming into positions of leadership through these different workforces, and, you know, guiding people to those areas and those spaces where they can interact with those people is really important. I'll leave it at that, but I wanted to touch really quickly before I stop talking on what we were kind of discussing earlier, which was you had mentioned about, you know, Black Lives Matter is really focused on police brutality, and you know, most of that is centered around Black men. I just wanted to touch on that because I think there's something important in there that you said.
I'm going to interrupt you just one quick second because Jacqueline has to hop off. So I just want to say thank you. And we'll come right back to you, Amari. Jacqueline, if you want to give a call to action before you leave, please take the mic for a moment.
Thank you. And I'm sorry I have to jump off. My call to action is very simple. Keep the dialogue open. Try to stay as open as you can about different points of view. And I love what all of you are doing, and just keep doing it. I mean, you know, my call to action is really all about opening up the dialogue, keep the communication lines open, and see what happens, you know, because I think, you know, it was pointed out that, you know, Sparrow shared this, you know, love and joy and so forth. Keep your hearts open. I mean, that's really a big piece right there. Keep your heart open. Even when it looks like people want to keep shutting it down, keep it open. That would be my best call to action on this one. It was a pleasure to meet every one of you. And thank you for your work.
Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Okay, back to you, Amari.
Yeah, that was awesome. She was great. I'm so happy we got to meet her. So really quickly, I just wanted to touch on why that continues to be a focus and will continue most likely to be the driving factor in Black Lives Matter. There's so many things, but if I could put it into a nutshell, it would be that police brutality and mass incarceration of Black Americans, you know, that is one of the biggest examples of how systemic oppression has, for generations, informed how we treat Black Americans, how we treat Black men and Black children. We enforce them to grow up early. Most of the times when it's a child that's a victim of police brutality, typically a boy, he's referred to as a man or a young man. And the propaganda around criminalizing Black people has been focused on the Black man and dehumanizing the Black man. So there's a reason that police brutality is one of the driving forces of Black Lives Matter. When you can change that, the systemic oppression in America within the justice system against Black men and Black Americans, when you can change the bad propaganda out there that, you know, you have Trump's administration who he basically ran his whole campaign on, you know, this whole law and order and like trying to end this super predator, which is obviously like a broken record thing. Like America has experienced this many times before with other Republican presidents. This is nothing new, but they're successful. Like they're very successful in dehumanizing the Black race through the Black man. So I think, you know, obviously police brutality is a huge problem. America is the #1 country in the world to incarcerate people at the rate that we do, in the history of the world, in fact. So I would say that's something that we have to, every single person has to get behind and put their efforts into changing that in order for anyone else to have a chance at equality, in order for Black women and LGBTQ and every other marginalized group. It is all tied into that, because it's tied into the idea that through propaganda and through poor leadership, you can dehumanize an entire race of people. So I just wanted to kind of talk about that really quick and why that is so important and will continue to be so important as we move forward under this new administration.
Thanks. Yeah, it is definitely an important issue. We've actually, Essential Stories has hosted many conversations about the incarceration issue, about the police brutality and how it's driven through by white supremacy, and I agree wholeheartedly that it's an alarming and far from new problem. And through those conversations that we've hosted with many dozens of wonderful activists like yourself, one theme that has come up a lot is how Black women so often get marginalized, even in Black movements, and forgotten. And actually, if we look at domestic violence statistics for women of color in this country, they're equal to, if not higher than, the number of men being killed by police brutality. So all of these things are no less or more important than each other. And the more we can see and acknowledge each of them in their own right, and rise up the female voices as well as the male voices, I think we'll all be better for it. But thank you very much for highlighting, why that issue too continues to be in the forefront of what we talk about and need to talk about. We need to start to wrap up our conversation. So I want to invite each panelist to give a call to action. We heard Jacqueline's right before she stepped off. Normally we take some questions from the audience, but because we're low on time, we will let the audience continue to have the conversation online through the chat on the video, as well as in our Essential Stories community page on Facebook, which was recently added. So that's a space and a forum for anyone interested in these conversations to continue it forward and exchange resources and information and so forth. So everybody's welcome to join that. And we'll just go in the same order that we started with. So starting with Mark and ending with Enrique. So just a 1 or 2 minute call to action to other activists, to people in general, whatever community you want to speak to.
Excellent. Well, very quickly as I can, I again will say support Biden when we can and oppose him and his administration when we must. That's a first starter. Work together, recognize that no one of our issues is the issue, but rather they all fit together as pieces of a puzzle, and we need to figure out ways to all work together. I would also just remind folks that when it comes to existential threats to everyone, not any particular group, but all of us, there are really two: nuclear weapons and climate change. Both of them have the potential for making every other important issue a moot point. So don't forget about those issues, but keep working on the other issues as well, and keep coming together and uniting to work for the kinds of future that we can all believe in and that hopefully the majority of our population will get behind. I'll throw in one more thing. The media is so important, and we need to pursue alternative media. I appreciate what you all are doing with this series. but I think that we need to really support community radio, alternative press, websites. Those are really key, especially when the right has been so mobilized and created an empire of hate radio and phone news and all kinds of lie machines that just crank out incredible amounts of propaganda on a daily basis. We need to somehow reach our fellow citizens with the truth.
Thanks, Mark. Ray, we should have started with you. Sorry, I forgot you were first before Mark even, so jump in there if you've got one.
So I'm trying to figure out how to say a lot in a very short amount of time, because I feel like the things that I just heard highlight something that's far deeper than anything that we can even begin to even touch on. Because you think on why it's so major that Black men are getting mowed down by the cops. Well, you look at how it feels to be a man in America, period, and you're raised to be this disposable body. Something that, oh, we'll just send you to war. There's 10, 12 other of you. You're not important unless you have money in your pocket, unless you're this manly man and you're this void, emotionless machine that we could use to go out and do dangerous jobs and to die. We can make another one of you. And then you have women that are basically not living a disposed life, but are treated like they have disposable bodies. And it's really damning, because you would think like, we all have these problems that are so much deeper than just race. It's just right down to the humanity. Even when you bring up how Mark sees it, we can't even respect our own fucking planet. When you go to someone's house and it's fucking dirty as shit, you think this is a nasty motherfucker. They didn't have to respect shit. And then you think about how we do the planet. We treat the planet like it's our house and we don't clean the shit. We'll do whatever the fuck. We just let our leaders do whatever the fuck to it, to basically get to the point where we are now, to where there's a lot of people that's very terrified that their children or their children's children won't have a place to live generations beyond now. That's because we dirty as shit and don't know how to respect anything. So it's hard for me to grasp that even just on race, we can begin to respectfully treat each other right. We can't even respect our own home. So my call to action would be to find the shit deeper than what you think is deepest. Because I guarantee you it goes way deeper than this. Stop raising people with this chauvinism, this machismo that they have to be this, to be that, or telling women that they're this disposable sex object and they can't control their own destiny, or that we can't even take care of the fucking planet. Just care for yourself, care for others, care for the soul. You know what I'm saying? That was what I was trying to say in a very short time. I probably didn't do it, but there we go.
Yeah, amen. I think that gets pretty to the heart of things. All right, so now it's Amari's call to action.
Yeah, mine's pretty, I'll keep it really short. Honestly, if you're not involved in something, and by something, I mean some type of, justice organization, find one in your area and get involved. Whether that's, just for a couple days a week, or it becomes an everyday thing. Rally more people, because there's power in numbers, and there's a lot of people who, they want, healthcare for all, and they want racism to not be a thing, and they want to change the system, but they're not doing anything about it. Or if they are doing something about it, they're stopping at the voting booth, and it doesn't stop there. You have to spend and invest your time, in your everyday life towards supporting people who are fighting for these issues and organizations who are fighting for these issues, or doing it yourself. So find something local and start there. It's that change that creates that type of national and global change. It's starting local, like Stacey Abrams did with Georgia, and flipping an entire state in what's been the most essential election, so far in American history, in my opinion. So So yeah, get involved and get your friends involved and make a point of it. Be religious about it. And that's it.
Thanks. And it really sounds, thanks for sharing a bunch about what you're focusing on in Missouri with Black Lives Matter. It sounds like you're really, doing that work of finding ways to unify each community together in your immediate city and finding bridges to offer people, which is so important on every local level, and that accumulates to bigger things. So thank you for doing that, and keep on going. I hope this conversation helps to energize the work that each person is doing, to just feel like there are other good people out there in it with you. Sparrow, do you have a call to action?
Of course, yeah. I thought I'd read a few of my poems. This is a poem called Paradox. Paradox. There are thousands of ways to destroy a car, but only one way to build one. I don't know what it means, but it sounds sort of true. This is called Beatific Vision. In heaven, Trump lovers and Biden supporters will embrace. And this is called Bad News for Donald Trump. There's no Adderall in prison. And I'm going to read a little bit more from Small Happiness. Think in black and white, live in color. I don't know what that means either. And then I think I'll end with this. Next time you buy a pizza pie, give away a slice to someone standing around. Thank you.
Excellent. Sounds like that last call to action sounds good for everybody. Yeah, I hope that we'll lean more towards thinking in color as well as acting in color. But maybe the poem has a deeper meaning that I missed. Thanks, Sparrow. All right, Enrique, please give your call to action. You're muted there. Let me see if I can help unmute you. Oh, there
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
All right. Well, thanks, everybody. This is a great group. I wish I could have been on the whole time. I think it was Umari that said about the great groups that are already out there. And I agree. There's a lot of great organizations that are doing a lot of work. And we got to continue to reach out to them, tap into them, learn about them. We don't need to reinvent the world or the wheel either. So, let's see what's going on out there. Let's continue to support these various groups, especially the groups that you're not a part of. I work very closely with the Muslim community, and I'm not Muslim. My old girlfriend is Muslim. I work very closely with the gay community, and I'm not gay. But an attack on one of us is an attack on all of us, and that's what we all need to rise up. We do a daily walk for Breonna Taylor. We're continuing with those efforts here in San Diego. Our group, genteunida.net, we do a lot of outreach to the children. We go and visit the shelters in Tijuana, which is right across the border, and bring them love. We have dance therapy and music therapy and art therapy. And we're continually doing this, both through Zoom and actually in person, taking all the necessary precautions. Because the society is judged on how we treat our children. And what has taken the last 4 years is the worst of the possible worst. And we need to turn that around, and we need to turn it around now. So I have a couple of, I'm not as eloquent as Sparrow with his poetry, but I do got a couple of sayings that I wrote down that we're all familiar with, and they're from heroes to most of us. John Lewis taught us about getting into good trouble. There's a lot of good trouble out there we need to get into. There was a woman that was killed, and we all saw it and heard about it. And I work very closely with Southern Poverty Law Center. And what this woman said is, if you're not outraged, you're not paying attention. And that was Heather Heyer, who was killed in Virginia by people that Trump called some good people. There's also, of course, Martin Luther King, when he talked about we know the people that are speaking out and saying these terrible things, and we're all familiar with that. But the people we really have to stay focused on are the people that remain silent. We cannot be silent. We need to speak out. And Ruby taught us, the great 12th century mystic, that it's the wounds. We have a lot of wounds. We all have a lot of wounds with what's been going on. That's where the light comes in. That's where the light comes in. Let that light come in, because there's a wonderful world out there, and we just got to make sure that we can pull that, that darkness back and walk into that light. And all of us are pieces of that light, because not only are we the drop in the ocean exists within that drop. So let's exemplify that in all of our actions, because love is an action, not just a word. So I'm honored to meet all of you. I'd love to have you come out to San Diego. We can go across the border together and visit some of these shelters and show some love. Let's continue supporting our Black Lives Matter brothers and sisters, especially on a daily basis. And lastly, here in San Diego, at the wall, with that horrible wall where Trump didn't build anymore, but 11,000 people have died. Right now, this administration is blowing up burial sites of the indigenous people. They're blowing them up. And every time something like that happens, it really, really hurts all of us. And we need to be that change. We need to turn that around. And I know we will. So, amor, sí se puede. Muchas gracias.
Thank you. This video will be available on our YouTube channel and our Facebook page, so feel free to share it and forward it from there. And Amari, you're the only person here that I don't think I'm connected with yet on Facebook, but if you will accept my friend request, then I can connect each of you to each other so that you can be in touch and resource each other as desired or needed. Thank you so much for the good work that you're all doing in the world and in the country. And thank you for being part of this conversation.
Thanks for having us. Thanks for doing it.
My pleasure. And Ray and Fonto, I think, hopped off already. It was really an honor to have you both and your words also. Thank you and good night.
Night.
Thank you.
Today's platform.